everyone, it's Sarah and welcome to my crochet channel. Today's video I'm going to show you how to make this chunky button cowl. They're lovely to wear and warm to wear as well, and they're super easy to make. And even though I put it at an easy pattern, it really is a beginner pattern. If you can stitch a single crochet in the back loop, you can make this cowl. And it also makes wonderful gifts. You don't have to make it in these Christmas colors. You can make it in any colors that you want to. And when we talk about yarns in just a minute, you'll see there are some varieties of ways that you can make it as well. And as always, this is a free crochet pattern on my blog, and you can find that blog link down in the notes underneath this video. To make your chunky button cowl, you're going to need about 12 ounces of yarn. And this is the yarn that I chose to use, Yarn Bee Color Play Royal Guard, and you get about 3.5 ounces on each of the skeins. And something that I discovered as I was working with it is basically this yarn is 2 strands of yarn, a white and a red or cranberry, and they're wound together. This is a chunky number 6 yarn. If you cannot get a hold of some of this style yarn, of course you can use any bulky or chunky number 6 weight yarn. But if you cannot get that, another alternative is to use 1 strand of medium weight number 4 in the white and 1 strand of medium weight 4 in the cranberry, and hold them together, and you can see that you get a similar look. And you can do that with any colors that you want to. So you can use a bulky number 6 weight yarn, or you can use 2 medium number 4 weight yarns held together. And either way you decide to crochet, whether with the 2 strands of medium 4 or with a bulky 6, you'll still use the same crochet hook. We're going to be stitching with an N, which is a 9.00 millimeter crochet hook. Now some ends are a 10, and if you choose to use the 10 millimeter, it's going to be a little bit looser and bigger, and I prefer for this project the 9 millimeter crochet hook. You're going to need a needle with a nice big eye in it. You'll need 3 or 4 buttons, however you choose, and these are nice big buttons. They're about 2 inches across. And then of course you'll need your scissors. We're going to begin with our slip knot, and then we're going to chain 23 chains. And again, I do recommend that you chain this initial chain loosely. The reason for that is when we put the scarf together like this to form that sort of V, you don't want the edge of your scarf to be all puckered up. Alright, so there's 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. 1, 2, and 3. Now, the nature of this yarn makes it a little bit difficult to see the stitches, so I'm going to go nice and slow and try to get up close so you can see what I'm doing. We began with our 23 chains. We're going to stitch a single crochet in the second chain from the hook. We don't count the loop on our hook. Here's our first chain, here's our second. So we're going to go in, pull up a loop, yarn over, and go through both loops. And whether you're using 2 strands of medium number 4 yarn or a bulky number 6, it's all stitched exactly the same. And so what we're going to do is we're going to stitch 1 single crochet in each of the stitches across. We began with a chain of 23. We placed our first single crochet in the second chain from the hook, and so we have 22 single crochets across. Now, if you want to adjust this pattern, say you want to make it wider, 2 single crochets or 2 chains equal 1 inch. And we're going to be stitching this in a long row, and if you get to the end you decide you want to add more rows, 1 row equals approximately 1 inch, and so you can go wider or longer if you want to. Your finished scarf will be approximately 11 inches across and 90 inches long. Alright, so I'm going to finish my row of stitching 1 single crochet in each of the chains across. I've completed that row. I have 22 single crochets across. I'm going to chain 1 and turn my work. We're going to be stitching in what's called stitching in the back loops only. We're going to be stitching 1 single crochet in each stitch, but we'll be stitching in those back loops. If you look at the top of your stitches, you'll see that there are loops on this side and loops on this side. The loops that are facing you are your front loops. The loops that are facing away are your back loops. And so we'll only be stitching in the back loops. Our chain 1 does not count as a stitch, it's just a turning chain. So we're going to begin in our very first back loop. We'll go in the back loop, pull up a loop, yarn over, and go through both of those loops. And we'll do this all the way across. 1 single crochet in each single crochet, stitching in the back loops only. What you will begin to see is a ridge right here on the front of your work. That's exactly what we want it to have. So I will continue across, stitching 1 single crochet in each of the back loops. I've completed this row, and again I have 22 stitches, 1 single crochet in each of the single crochets, stitching in that back loop only. We're going to chain 1 and turn. And when you turn, you'll notice there is an indentation on the back side. We want it that way also. All right, now for row 3, we're going to repeat what we did on row 2. We're going to stitch 1 single crochet in each of the back loops across. Our chain 1 now and throughout the project does not count as a stitch. It is merely just a turning chain. So we'll begin in the first back loop of our first single crochet and stitch a single crochet. And then we'll stitch 1 single crochet in each of those stitches across, working again in the back loops. So again, 1 single crochet in each single crochet, stitching in the back loops only, working all the way across our row. You'll see again that ridge on the front, and if you look on the back side, you'll have an indentation here. And again, that's exactly how we want it to look. So I'll complete this row and stitch 1 single crochet in each single crochet across, stitching in those back loops only. I completed that third row, 1 single crochet in each single crochet, stitching in the back loop only. This is what we're going to continue to repeat. We'll stitch the row, we'll chain 1 and turn and repeat. 1 single crochet in each of the back loops of each single crochet, working all the way across, chain 1, turn, and repeat. And you're going to repeat this, row 3, for an additional 87 rows, or until you have 90 rows of stitches. That's the length that we need for our cowl. So we're going to repeat row 3 for 87 more rows. That's a lot of rows. I better get busy. I have completed my 90 rows, and make sure that you don't accidentally add or subtract any stitches in your rows, which when you're doing long rows sometimes, like we did on these where we have 90 rows, it's easy to accidentally add or subtract a stitch, and then it ends up a little bit more narrow or wider. So make sure you count each row, and each row should have 22 single crochets. When you've come to the last row that you're going to do, before you cut your yarn off, I suggest that you try it on. Make sure it's long enough or it's not too long for you. You may need to add some more rows, or you may need to take some out to make it fit. All right? So that's a really easy way to adjust it before we finish up. Once you're happy that it's going to fit you, we're going to cut our yarn and tie that off. And then we're going to need to use our needle and weave in both ends, the beginning and the end of our cowl, which is kind of neat. We don't have a lot of weaving in to do. Where you joined in new yarns, new skeins, you'll have to weave those in. And this yarn, if you're using it, is a little bit tricky because it's a little bit fuzzy, and it is difficult to go in the fibers of the yarn. When I'm weaving something in, I try to go in the stitches and the fibers so that it blends in nicely and it's not going to come out. All right, there's one, and then I need to do the other one, and then I'm going to show you how to lay it out and add your buttons. The way you lay out your cowl is you're going to lay one side underneath, then you'll lay the other side across, and you're going to want to lay it so that you can put your buttons on this edge. And what we'll do, the buttons do not have buttonholes. They're going to just hold it in place, and then we'll also tack it down on this side just a little bit to hold that in place as well. You're going to slip the cowl over your head. You're not going to button and unbutton it. The buttons are decorative. All right? So here is the cowl. You want to line up this edge with this on top. All right, I'm going to scoot this down a little so you can see this edge. I'll put my hand in here. This yarn is difficult to see. I understand that. And once I get it all completed and I put it on the mannequin, you'll be able to see how it lays better. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to add our buttons, and I'm using these 3 big white buttons. You can choose any buttons that you like. You can add 3, 5, however that you want. What I do is I start at the bottom where everything's met up, and I decided to go with a little bit smaller needle because my buttonholes are kind of small and I wanted to make sure my needle was going to go through. And I also chose to use a worsted weight number 4 medium weight yarn to sew it on. It's going to match the button and match my cowl. Alright, so I'm going to move this up. Here's where I'm going to place my first button. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through, and I'm going to go through some of the stitches. I'm going to leave a tail of yarn. I'm going to turn this so I can get my hand under it. And I'm just going to make a loop that goes all the way through to the back and then back up. And then I can snug that down just a little bit. Then I'm going to add my button. I want it to be right on this corner. Whoops. There we go. Get that through there. And then I'll stitch it on by adding a few stitches. Alright, I'm going to go back up one more time, see if I can get one more thread through there. I can. Alright, so now I'm going to turn to the inside and I'm going to tie a couple of knots. You know I like to do 3. 1, 2, and 3. Alright, and we'll just clip that. So there's my first button. Alright, then I want to line up this row right here, so I'm stitching on the same row, and it's going to lay nice and straight. So I'm on this row. Now, don't stretch it, don't pull it, because you want it to lay nice and pretty. And I'm going to add my button up here. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to come from the bottom, leave a tail of yarn, go back and back up. Alright, we'll pull both of those, make sure they're snug down. Then we'll add the button. And I've got that one going that way, so I'm going to do this one the same way. And we're going through a lot of fabric here with this chunky yarn, so you're just going to have to work with it a little bit. Get it in there. There we go. Alright, we'll go to the inside again, and we'll tie those 3 knots. 1, 2, and 3. I will tell you, if you're a little bit worried that that knot's not going to hold, add a little fabric glue to it, and it will hold just fine. Just give it a little time to dry before you wear it. Alright, now we have the 2 outside buttons, and we can center that button in the center so that it lines up nicely. Alright, and we'll do the same thing. Set my button down there. Oops, I need to go underneath. Tried to go on top. It's very important that you go through both thicknesses because you don't want your button not to be sewn on tightly, but also you want to make sure it's going to hold those 2 pieces of fabric together. Get in that hole. There we go. Alrighty, so I'm done with that one. I'm going to go to the inside of my cowl. And now I have all 3 buttons in place. 1, 2, and 3 knots, and clip. Now, if you want to tack it down some more, you feel like that's not going to hold it well enough for you, you can tack it down in between here if you want to. I don't. I haven't on my other ones. The only place that I do is on this side. And what I do is I go ahead and thread a piece of the matching yarn on my needle with the little bit bigger eye. A nice big piece here. And I'll meet the corners up. And I'll just do a few whip stitches. And that's why I want to use the matching yarn, because I don't want it to show. It is underneath, so it doesn't show, but if you're using, you know, maybe just solid red or solid white, it might not look as neat. And this way it just blends right in. And you just follow this up. There we go. Just stitching whip stitches on this side, and that's going to help it also stay in place. And once this row is done, then our cowl is completed and ready to wear. And make sure when you're doing these stitches that you're not going real tight. You want it still to have a little bit of stretch so you can get it on and off, and it will lay really pretty. Alright, so I finished with the whip stitches. I'm going to weave this in so it blends in nicely. Looks like I have an end in there I need to weave in that I didn't get in real good, so I'll go back and fix that as well. Alrighty, this yarn does have a tendency to have just a little bit of fluff to it, or fuzz would probably be a better term. And at the beginning when I was whip stitching, I stitched over my tail of yarn, so I didn't have to weave that in. Alright, so here is our finished cowl. It's super cute, super stretchy, and super comfortable to wear. And remember, even though I did this in red and white, you can do this in any colors that you want. I know that this particular yarn is difficult to see on camera, and so I'm going to put it on my mannequin so you can see it just a little bit better.